The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in Philadelphia, smudged with dirt and hope, offering Eliza Norton a chance to escape the suffocating walls of her aunt's boarding house where she scrubbed floors until her knuckles bled, and her dreams felt as distant as the Western territories she read about in dime novels. Now, 3 weeks later in June of 1883, Eliza stood on the wooden platform of Tascosa, Texas, her worn carpetbag clutched in trembling hands as the train's whistle faded into the endless blue sky. The heat pressed against her like a physical weight, so different from Philadelphia's humid summers. Dust swirled around her ankles, coating the hem of her only good dress, a faded green cotton that had seen better days. The town stretched before her, a collection of weathered buildings that looked like they might blow away in a strong wind, and she wondered if she had made the biggest mistake of her life. The advertisement had been simple. Rancher seeking wife, must be of good character and willing to work. Yates Patterson had written 3 letters, each more formal than the last, detailing his ranch outside Tascosa, his age of 32 years, and his need for a proper wife to help manage his household. He had never mentioned love. Neither had she. Love was a fairy tale, something she had stopped believing in after watching her mother waste away waiting for a father who drank more than he provided, after her own brief courtship with Thomas ended when he chose a girl with a proper dowry instead. This arrangement was practical, honest. She would have a home, and Yates Patterson would have a wife. That was the bargain she had accepted. A man separated from the small crowd gathered near the general store. He was tall, with shoulders that spoke of hard labor and a face weathered by sun and wind. His hat shadowed his eyes, but she could see the firm set of his jaw as he approached. He moved with a deliberate confidence, boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. "Miss Norton." His voice was deeper than she had imagined, rougher somehow, like it had been scraped raw by the vast landscape surrounding them. Yes, her own voice came out smaller than intended. She cleared her throat. "Mr. Patterson," he nodded once, reaching for her bag. "The wagon's just there. We should get moving before the heat gets worse." She had expected something more, a greeting, perhaps even a smile. But Yates Patterson simply turned and walked toward a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 horses, assuming she would follow, and she did, because what choice did she have? The train had already departed, carrying with it her only means of return to Philadelphia, not that she had anything to return to. The wagon ride lasted nearly an hour, filled with silence except for the creak of wheels and the steady clop of hooves against the hard, packed earth. Eliza studied her future husband from the corner of her eye. His hands on the reins were scarred and calloused, capable hands. A shadow of dark stubble covered his jaw, and his profile could have been carved from the rocky outcroppings they passed. He was handsome in a harsh way, she supposed, though she had not come here seeking handsome. She had come here seeking survival. "The ranch is another mile," he finally said, breaking the oppressive quiet. "Not much to look at, but it's mine. Ours, I suppose, once we're married proper." "When is the wedding?" she asked, her stomach tightening at the thought. "Tomorrow. The circuit preacher is in town. Figured we might as well get it done." He glanced at her briefly, his eyes a startling blue against his tanned skin. "Unless you need more time." Did she need more time? Time for what? To get to know this stranger she was binding her life to. Time to reconsider. Time to run. "Tomorrow is fine," she heard herself say. The ranch appeared over a rise, and despite herself, Eliza felt a flutter of something that might have been hope. The house was modest but sturdy, built of wood that had weathered to a soft gray. A porch wrapped around the front, and in the distance, she could see a barn and several outbuildings. Cattle dotted the landscape, and the whole property was ringed by rough fencing. It was more than she had dared imagine. Yates brought the wagon to a stop near the house. "I cleaned up the spare room for you. You can stay there until after the wedding." His consideration surprised her. She had half expected him to assume certain rights regardless of ceremony. "Thank you." He helped her down from the wagon, his hands spanning her waist easily, setting her on the ground with care before stepping back quickly as if she might burn him. "I'll get your bag. You should go inside, get out of this sun. You are already looking flushed." The inside of the house was dim and blessedly cooler. The main room served as both kitchen and sitting area, with a large fireplace dominating one wall. The furniture was simple and masculine, clearly chosen for function rather than comfort, but it was clean. Through one doorway, she glimpsed what must be his bedroom. Through another, a smaller room with a narrow bed and a washstand. "I am not much of a cook," Yates said from behind her, setting her bag inside the smaller room. "But I can manage basic things. Beans, bacon, bread when I have time to bake it. I can cook," Eliza said quickly, "and clean, so whatever you need." His expression softened slightly. "I am not looking for a servant, Miss Norton. I am looking for a wife." She wanted to ask what the difference was, but bit her tongue. Instead, she nodded. "I will do my best to be a good wife. I will do my best to be a good husband." He stood awkwardly in the doorway, this large man suddenly seeming uncertain. "I know this is not a conventional situation, but I aim to treat you right. You will want for nothing I can provide." That night, Eliza lay in the narrow bed, listening to unfamiliar sounds. Cattle lowing in the distance, the creak of the house settling, the whisper of wind through the eaves. She thought about tomorrow, about standing before a preacher and binding herself to a stranger. She thought about fairy tales, about the stories her mother used to tell of princes and true love, and how life had taught her those were just stories. This was real. This was survival, and perhaps, if she was very lucky, it might even become comfortable. Sleep came fitfully and morning arrived too soon. Yates knocked on her door at dawn. "I am heading into town early. Need to finalize some business before the wedding. You should wear whatever you would like for the ceremony. I will be back by noon." She heard his boots on the wooden floor, then the front door closing. Through the small window, she watched him ride away on a sturdy brown horse, sitting easy in the saddle like he had been born there. Eliza rose and washed with the cool water in the basin. She had one other dress, a simple blue calico she had sewn herself. It was not a wedding dress by any means, but it was the best she had. She pressed it carefully, heating the iron on the stove Yates had left burning low, and pinned up her dark hair with her mother's silver combs, the only valuable thing she owned. The morning stretched endlessly. She explored the house more thoroughly, noting the bare cupboards that held only basics, the lack of curtains on the windows, the complete absence of anything decorative or soft. It was a house where a man lived alone, where no woman had ever added her touch. She found herself wondering about Yates Patterson, about why a man with property and prospects needed to send for a bride rather than courting locally. He returned exactly at noon, riding up with another man she did not recognize. Both had clearly made an effort to clean up. Yates wore a clean shirt and had shaved, revealing the strong lines of his face. He looked younger without the stubble, and when he removed his hat as he entered the house, she saw his hair was dark brown with sun-lightened streaks. "This is my neighbor, Frank Meadows," Yates introduced. "He will stand as witness." Frank was older, probably 50, with kind eyes and a weathered face. He tipped his hat to Eliza. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Norton. Yates here is a good man. You are getting yourself a fine husband." The ride back to town was less silent than the previous day. Frank filled the quiet with easy conversation about the weather, the cattle market, and local happenings. Yates remained mostly quiet, but Eliza caught him glancing at her several times, his expression unreadable. The church was small, barely more than a wooden structure with a simple cross mounted on the wall. The circuit preacher was an elderly man named Reverend Thompson, who had married more mail-order brides than he could count. He asked no questions about love or lengthy courtships, simply opened his worn Bible and began the ceremony with Frank and the preacher's wife as witnesses. Eliza's hands shook as Yates took them in his own. His grip was warm and steady, and she focused on that, on the solid reality of his presence as the Reverend's words washed over her. When it came time to speak her vows, her voice was barely a whisper, but Yates squeezed her hands gently, and she found the strength to speak louder. His own vows were delivered in that deep, rough voice, each word deliberate and clear. "You may kiss your bride." Yates hesitated, his blue eyes meeting hers with something that might have been asking permission. Then he leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was brief and chaste, but Eliza felt it all the way to her toes, a spark of something unexpected that made her breath catch. They signed the registry, and just like that, she was married. Eliza Patterson, wife of a Texas rancher, bound to a man she had known for less than a day. Frank insisted on buying them dinner at the hotel restaurant, a modest celebration of their union. The food was simple but good, beef and potatoes and fresh bread. Yates barely touched his plate, and Eliza found her own appetite had fled. They were both acutely aware of what came next, the wedding night that would seal their union in more than just words. The ride back to the ranch seemed simultaneously too long and too short. Frank had departed with hearty congratulations, and Eliza and Yates were alone in the wagon, the late afternoon sun painting the landscape in shades of gold and amber. The beauty of it struck her suddenly, this wild, open country so different from the cramped streets of Philadelphia. "It is beautiful here," she said softly. Yates looked at her in surprise, then followed her gaze across the rolling plains. "I suppose it is. I have been here so long I sometimes forget to notice." "How long have you had the ranch?" 8 years. "I worked for the previous owner, saved every penny, and when he was ready to retire, he sold it to me for less than it was worth. Said he admired a man who worked hard." Yates paused. "I built it up from there. Started with 50 head of cattle. Now I have over 300. There was pride in his voice, and Eliza found herself curious. "That is impressive. You must work very hard." "Work is all I know." He glanced at her again. "But a ranch needs more than just work. It needs a family. I am 32 years old, and I have spent the last 8 years building something with no one to share it with. That gets lonely after a while." The honesty in his words touched something in her chest. "I understand loneliness." They said nothing more until they reached the ranch. Yates helped her down from the wagon with the same careful touch as before, then tended to the horses while Eliza went inside. The house felt different now. This was her home, her responsibility, her life. She started a fire in the stove and began preparing supper from the supplies she found, beans and bacon and coffee. When Yates came in from the barn, his eyes widened at the domestic scene. "You did not have to do that already," he said. "I wanted to." She ladled beans onto 2 plates. "Besides, I am your wife now. This is what wives do, is it not?" They ate at the small table, and Eliza became aware of every sound, every movement. The scrape of his fork against the plate, the way he drank his coffee black and hot, the breadth of his shoulders blocking the light from the window. When supper was finished, he helped her clear the dishes, their hands brushing in the soapy water, sending that same unexpected spark through her. Eliza. Her name sounded different in his voice. I know this is all very sudden. We are strangers, really, bound by law but not by anything else. I will not force myself on you. We can take time to become comfortable with each other. She turned to face him, this man who was now her husband. His blue eyes were sincere, and she realized he was trying to be kind, to give her a choice in what came next. We are married, she said quietly. I know my duty. Duty. He said the word like it tasted bitter. I do not want you to come to my bed out of duty. Then what do you want? He looked at her for a long moment, something flickering in his expression that she could not quite name. I suppose I want what every man wants. A true wife, a partner, someone who chooses to be with me, not just because circumstances left them no other option. The words stung because they were too close to the truth. I am here, am I not? I spoke vows before God. What more do you want from me? I want you to mean them. His voice was rough with emotion now. But I know that is too much to ask after one day, so I am saying we can wait. Take time. I have waited this long for a wife. I can wait a bit longer for her to want to be one. Eliza did not know what to say. No man had ever given her this choice before. Her whole life had been about duty and obligation, about doing what was necessary to survive. And here was this rancher, this stranger, offering her time and patience she had never expected. Thank you, she whispered finally. He nodded and stepped back. I will sleep in the barn tonight. You take the main bedroom. It is more comfortable. No, I cannot take your room. I will stay where I was, Eliza. There was something almost pleading in how he said her name. Let me do this one thing. Let me give you the better room, please. So she did, because she sensed this mattered to him in a way she did not fully understand. She took her carpetbag into the main bedroom and closed the door, then sat on the edge of the larger bed and tried to understand what had just happened. She had married a man who did not want to claim his husbandly rights, a man who spoke of wanting more than duty, a man who confused her in ways she had not anticipated. The next days fell into a strange rhythm. Yates rose before dawn and worked until dusk, coming in only for the meals Eliza prepared. She spent her days learning the house, establishing her place in it, adding small touches where she could. She washed curtains she found in a trunk and hung them in the windows. She reorganized the kitchen to make it more efficient. She mended his shirts where they had frayed and torn. They were polite to each other, carefully polite, dancing around each other like strangers sharing a space, which in truth they were. Yates continued to sleep in the barn, though Eliza insisted she would return to the smaller room. He refused with a stubbornness she was beginning to recognize as fundamental to his character. A week after their wedding, Eliza woke to shouting. She stumbled from bed and rushed to the window to see Yates in the yard, facing down 3 men on horseback. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his body, the way his hand hovered near the gun at his hip. Fear froze her for a moment, then she grabbed a shawl and hurried outside. I told you before, Creed, I am not selling, Yates was saying, his voice hard as iron. This land is not for sale at any price. The man in the center, presumably Creed, was well dressed in a way that stood out in this rough country. His horse was finer than the others, his saddle decorated with silver. Everyone has a price, Patterson. You are just being stubborn. The railroad is coming through and I am offering you fair market value. Fair market value determined by you for land you want to profit from. Yates stepped forward. I built this ranch from nothing. It is my home. You cannot put a price on that. You built it alone, sure enough, Creed said, and there was something ugly in his smile. But I hear you have got yourself a wife now, pretty thing from back east. Shame if something was to happen. out here where things can be dangerous for folks who do not have sense enough to accept a good offer. The threat was clear, and Eliza saw Yates go very still, a dangerous kind of stillness. "You threatening my wife, Creed? Just stating facts. Accidents happen, especially to people who do not know their way around these parts yet." Eliza did not think, just acted. She stepped off the porch and walked straight to Yates's side. "I know my way well enough," she said clearly. "And I know my husband's mind. This is our home and we are keeping it." Yates looked at her with something that might have been shock, then turned back to Creed. "You heard my wife. Now get off my property before I make you." Creed's smile disappeared. "This is not over, Patterson. The railroad wants this route and they are going to get it one way or another. Then they will have to go through me." Yates's hand was definitely on his gun now. "And I am not moving." The three men turned their horses and rode off, but the menace lingered like smoke in the air. When they were out of sight, Yates turned to Eliza, his face a mixture of anger and concern. "You should not have come out here. That man is dangerous. He threatened me. I had a right to face him." "You had a right to stay safe." But his eyes were searching her face, looking for something. "You called this our home. It is it not? I am your wife. This ranch is my home now." Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the careful distance he had maintained. "You meant it. Just now when you stood with me, you meant it." "Yes." And as she said it, Eliza realized it was true. Somewhere in the past week, between the quiet meals and the careful politeness, between hanging curtains and mending shirts, this place had become home. This man had become her husband in more than just name. "I meant it." Yates took a step closer, then another, until he was near enough that she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes. "I am going to kiss you now, if that is acceptable." Her heart was pounding, but she nodded. "It is acceptable." This kiss was nothing like the chaste brush of lips at their wedding. This kiss was fierce and claiming, his hands coming up to frame her face as his mouth moved over hers with unmistakable hunger. Eliza gasped against his lips, and he gentled immediately, turning the kiss into something softer but no less intense, a question and an answer all at once. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that since the moment I saw you step off that train." "You have a strange way of showing it," she said, but there was no heat in her words. "I wanted you to choose me, not because you had to, but because you wanted to." His hands were still on her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones gently. "I wanted it to be real." "I thought love was a fairy tale," she whispered, "something that does not exist in real life." "Maybe it is not love yet," he said, "but it could be, if we let it." That night, Yates did not sleep in the barn. He came to the bedroom door and knocked softly, and when Eliza opened it, he looked at her with such naked hope that her breath caught. "I am still not going to force anything," he said quietly. "But I would like to sleep beside my wife, if she will have me." Eliza reached out and took his hand, drawing him into the room. They lay down together, fully clothed on top of the blankets, Yates on his back and Eliza curled tentatively against his side. His arm came around her, and she felt the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. "Tell me about Philadelphia," he said into the darkness. "Tell me who you were before you came here." So she did. She told him about her parents, her father's drinking and her mother's slow decline. About going to live with her aunt after her mother's death. About the boarding house and the endless work. About Thomas and his betrayal. About learning that love was a luxury she could not afford. When she finished, Yates was quiet for a long moment. Then he began to speak, his voice rumbling in his chest beneath her ear. He told her about growing up in Missouri, about losing his parents to fever when he was 16, about making his way west with nothing but determination and a strong back. about the loneliness of building a life alone, watching other men with families while he had only work and land. I told myself it was enough, he said. The ranch, the success, proving I could make something of myself. But it was not. Every night I would come back to an empty house, and I would wonder what I was building it all for. So I placed that advertisement, and I told myself I was being practical. I needed help, needed a wife to make the ranch a true home. But when you stepped off that train, looking so scared but trying so hard to be brave, I knew I wanted more than practical. I wanted you to be happy here. I wanted you to choose this life, to choose me, not just accept it because you had nowhere else to go. Eliza lifted her head to look at him in the moonlight streaming through the window. I choose you, Yates Patterson. Maybe I came here out of desperation, but I am staying by choice. And maybe it is not love yet, but I think it could be. I think you might be worth believing in fairy tales again. He kissed her then, sweetly and slowly, and she felt something tight in her chest begin to unfurl. They kissed until kissing was not enough, until clothing became an impediment and was shed slowly, carefully, with Yates constantly checking to make sure she wanted this, wanted him. And she did, with a fierceness that surprised her. Their joining was tender and awkward and wonderful, and afterward, Eliza lay in her husband's arms and thought maybe fairy tales were not so impossible after all. Maybe they just looked different than she had expected. Maybe they looked like a rancher with calloused hands and a careful heart. Maybe they looked like choosing each other, day after day, in 100 small ways. The next morning, Eliza woke wrapped in Yates's arms, sunlight streaming across the bed. He was already awake, watching her with an expression so soft it made her heart ache. "Morning, wife," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Morning, husband." She stretched, feeling pleasantly sore in new places. "I suppose you will be wanting breakfast. Eventually." He pulled her closer. But not just yet. They stayed in bed until the sun was high, learning each other in the daylight, and when they finally rose, Eliza felt changed. The careful distance that had marked their first week together was gone, replaced by a tentative intimacy that grew stronger with each passing hour. But the peace did not last. 3 days later, riders came in the night. Eliza woke to the smell of smoke and Yates shouting. They stumbled outside to find the barn ablaze, flames licking at the wooden structure while inside, the horses screamed in terror. Yates ran toward the burning building and Eliza ran after him, grabbing his arm. "You cannot go in there. The horses will die." He pulled free and plunged into the smoke, and Eliza's heart stopped. She stood frozen for an eternal moment, then saw him emerge leading both horses, their eyes rolling with fear. He got them clear and turned back. "There is nothing else worth dying for," she screamed at him. "The tack, the supplies, I can still save some of it." But the fire was too fierce, and even as he started back, part of the roof collapsed with a shower of sparks. Yates stopped, and Eliza saw the defeat in his shoulders as he watched his barn burn to the ground. When the fire finally died to embers, they stood together in the gray dawn light, ash drifting around them like snow. The barn was a total loss, everything in it destroyed. "Creed," Yates said flatly. "This is his answer to my refusal. Can we prove it? No, he is too smart for that. But I know it was him." He turned to her and she saw the fury in his eyes, but also fear. "I need to take you to town. You will stay at the hotel until this is settled." "Absolutely not." Eliza straightened her spine. "I am not leaving you. This is going to get worse before it gets better. I cannot protect you and fight Creed at the same time. I am not asking you to protect me. I am asking you to let me stand with you. We are partners, remember? Or did that only matter when I was agreeing with you?" They stared at each other, wills clashing, until finally Yates scrubbed a hand over his face. "You are the most stubborn woman I have ever met. You married me." "Yeah, I did." And despite everything, a small smile tugged at his mouth. "And I am starting to think I married someone a lot stronger than I gave her credit for." They rebuilt. Frank Meadows came with timber and supplies, refusing payment. Other neighboring ranchers showed up to help. Men Eliza had not met before who shook Yates's hand and shot sympathetic looks at the burned-out barn. By the end of the week, a new structure was rising, smaller than before but solid. "Folks around here do not much care for Creed," Frank explained to Eliza as they worked. "He has been buying up land, pushing people out. Most are too scared to stand against him because he has got money and influence. But Yates, he has earned respect around these parts. People want to help him." Eliza spent her days cooking for the work crews and fetching water, making herself useful however she could. At night, she and Yates fell into bed exhausted, but always they found the energy to reach for each other, to reaffirm their connection through touch and whispered words. "I love you," Yates said one night, the words startling in their suddenness. "I know it is fast and maybe it is foolish, but I love you, Eliza. I think I started loving you the moment you stood up to Creed with me." Eliza's throat tightened with emotion. "I love you too. I did not think I could. I did not think I knew how. But you taught me. You proved that love is not a fairy tale. It is work and choice and standing together even when things are hard, especially when things are hard." The barn was finished by the end of September, and with it came a new season of relative peace. But Eliza knew it could not last. Creed had made his move and failed. He would not let it rest. She was right. In early October, word came that Creed was challenging Yates's claim to his land, arguing that the original deed had irregularities. It was nonsense, but it would require Yates to travel to the county seat and present his case before a judge, a journey of 3 days each way. "I cannot leave you here alone for a week," Yates said when the summons arrived. "Then I will come with you. It is a hard journey. We would have to camp most nights." Eliza smiled. "Good thing I have a strong husband to take care of me then." They set out the next week, Eliza riding the gentler of their 2 horses while Yates led the way on his big bay gelding. The journey was indeed hard, with rough terrain and cold nights, but Eliza discovered she loved it. There was a freedom in the open country, under the vast starry sky, that she had never experienced in Philadelphia's cramped streets. At night, they made camp and Yates built fires that pushed back the darkness. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other in deeper ways. He told her his dreams for the ranch, expanding the herd, maybe raising horses too. She told him about wanting children someday, about creating the family she had never really had. "How many children?" he asked, pulling her close against the chill. 3, maybe 4. She looked up at him. "Is that too many? Not nearly enough." He kissed her forehead. "I want a house full of kids. I want noise and chaos and everything I did not have growing up. I want it all, Eliza. With you." The county seat was a larger town called Amarillo, bustling with activity that felt overwhelming after the quiet of the ranch. The hearing was scheduled for the next day, so they took a room at the hotel, a luxury that felt strange after camping under the stars. The hearing itself was tense. Creed's lawyer was slick and well-spoken, raising questions about the original sale, suggesting improprieties that had never existed. But Yates had kept every paper, every receipt, every piece of documentation. He presented his case calmly and thoroughly, and the judge, a no-nonsense man named Porter, saw through Creed's machinations quickly enough. "The claim is without merit," Judge Porter declared. "Mr. Patterson's ownership is legitimate and will stand. Mr. Creed, I suggest you find other avenues for your railroad that do not involve harassing honest ranchers." The victory should have felt sweeter, but Eliza saw the way Creed looked at Yates as they left the courthouse. This was not over. Men like Creed did not accept defeat gracefully. They started back to the ranch the next morning, riding hard to make good time. They were a day out from home when they realized they were being followed. 3 riders, keeping their distance but definitely tracking them. "Creed's men," Yates said grimly. "He is not going to let this go." "What do? We keep moving and hope they are just trying to scare us." But his hand stayed near his gun, and Eliza saw the tension in every line of his body. The attack came at dusk, when they were making camp in a small canyon. The 3 riders came in fast, guns drawn, and Yates barely had time to push Eliza behind a boulder before bullets started flying. He returned fire, his shots deliberate and controlled, and one of the attackers yelped and fell from his horse. "Stay down," Yates shouted to Eliza, then moved to a better position. 2 attackers left, and they were spreading out, trying to flank them. Eliza's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. This was not like the dime novels she used to read. This was real, with the smell of gunpowder and the taste of fear sharp in her mouth. One of the attackers got too close, and Yates took him down with a shot that echoed through the canyon. The last man broke and ran, clearly deciding the fight was not worth dying for. The silence that followed was deafening. "Are you hurt?" Yates was at her side immediately, hands running over her, checking for injuries. "No, I am fine. Are you?" "Yeah." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "God, Eliza, when I think what could have happened. But it did not. We are both fine." She pulled back to look at him. "But this has to end. We cannot live like this, always looking over our shoulders." They left the injured attacker with a horse and supplies despite his protests. Yates was not a killer unless forced to be. When they finally reached the ranch, exhausted and still on edge, they found Frank waiting for them. "Thank God you are back safe," Frank said. "I heard what happened at the courthouse. Figured Creed might try something." "He did," Yates said tersely. "And he is going to keep trying until he gets what he wants, or we stop him permanently." "What are you going to do?" Yates looked at Eliza, and she saw the war in his eyes. He wanted to protect her, but he also needed to stand his ground. "I am going to end this, one way or another." But Eliza had an idea. "Or we could beat him at his own game." Both men looked at her. "What do you mean?" Yates asked. "He wants this land for the railroad, right? Because it is the best route, but what if it was not? What if there was an easier route, one that would not require fighting stubborn ranchers?" "There is not one," Frank said. "Believe me, the railroad surveyors looked. This valley is the only good option for miles." "That we know of," Eliza pressed. "But has anyone actually surveyed the northern route? The one everyone says is too rough." Yates's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "You think there might be a way through?" "I think it is worth looking. And if we found one, we could present it to the railroad directly. Cut Creed out entirely." It was a long shot, but it was better than waiting for Creed's next attack. Over the next 2 weeks, Yates and Frank, along with several other ranchers tired of Creed's intimidation, surveyed the northern route. It was hard work, mapping terrain and calculating grades, but they found it. A route that was actually shorter and less steep, one that had been overlooked because everyone assumed it was impossible. Armed with their findings, Yates traveled to meet with the railroad representatives directly. Eliza insisted on going with him, and this time he did not argue. They presented their survey to a board of serious men in suits, and after much discussion and debate, the railroad agreed. The northern route was superior, and they would use it. Creed's reaction was predictable. He showed up at the ranch in a fury, but this time there was nothing he could do. The railroad had made their decision, and his threats held no weight. Yates stood on his porch with Eliza at his side and watched Creed ride away, defeated at last. "It is really over," Eliza said wonderingly. "We won." "You won," Yates corrected, pulling her close. "That was all your idea. You saved the ranch, Eliza. You saved us." That winter was harsh but wonderful. Snow fell deep, isolating them from the outside world for weeks at a time, but Eliza did not mind. She and Yates grew closer than she had ever imagined possible, learning to read each other's moods, finishing each other's sentences, moving together through their days with an easy rhythm that spoke of deep partnership. In February, Eliza realized she was pregnant. She told Yates one night as they sat by the fire, and his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He whooped with joy and spun her around, then immediately became concerned he had hurt the baby. "You did not," she laughed. "The baby is fine. We are fine." "We are going to have a family," he said wonderingly, his hand on her still flat belly. "A real family." The baby came in late September of 1884, a boy they named William after Yates's father. The birth was hard, but Eliza was strong, and the doctor from Tascosa who attended her said she had never seen a woman push with such determination. Yates was useless during the labor, pacing outside like a caged animal, but when he finally held his son, tears streamed down his weathered face. "He is perfect," Yates whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you, Eliza. Thank you for giving me everything I never dared dream of." William was followed by a daughter 2 years later whom they named Rose after Eliza's mother. Then came another boy, James, and finally another daughter, Clara. The house that had once been so empty filled with noise and life and love, exactly as Yates had wished. The ranch prospered over the years. Yates expanded the herd and did start raising horses, building a reputation for quality stock. Eliza managed the household and the accounts, her sharp mind for numbers proving invaluable. Together they built something that went far beyond a simple ranch. They built a legacy. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Yates took Eliza back to Tascosa, to the little church where they had married. The reverend was long gone, but the church remained. They stood where they had stood a decade before, and Yates took her hands just as he had then. "I have something to say," he told her. "I got it all wrong the first time." "What do you mean?" "When we married, I said those vows because it was what you were supposed to say. I meant them, but I did not understand them, not really. So I want to say them again now that I know what they truly mean." He took a breath. "I, Yates Patterson, take you, Eliza Norton Patterson, to be my wife. I promise to love you, to stand with you, to choose you every single day for the rest of my life. You taught me that love is not a fairy tale, but you also taught me that it is real and worth fighting for. You are worth fighting for. Our life together is worth everything." Eliza was crying, happy tears streaming down her face. "I, Eliza Norton Patterson, take you, Yates Patterson, to be my husband. I promise to love you, to stand with you, to choose you every single day. You proved to me that love exists, that it is built in moments and choices and standing together through everything life throws at us. I thought love was a fairy tale, but you showed me it was real. You showed me what it means to be truly loved." They kissed in that little church, sealing their vows again, only this time with the full weight of a decade of love and partnership and choosing each other, day after day, through good times and hard. 20 years after that first awkward meeting on the train platform, Eliza sat on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in shades of gold and crimson. William was married now, running his own small ranch nearby with his wife and their first baby. Rose was teaching at the school in Tascosa, engaged to a kind young lawyer. James was off at university, determined to study law and return to help his community. Clara, at 15, was inside helping her father with the account books, showing the same head for numbers her mother had. Yates came out to join her, moving a bit slower now, his dark hair streaked with silver but his blue eyes still as piercing as ever. He sat beside her and took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how scared I was stepping off that train, about how I thought I was accepting a life sentence, not choosing a life." She squeezed his hand. "About how wrong I was. Best thing I ever did placing that advertisement," Yates said. "Best gamble I ever took." "It was not a gamble." Eliza turned to look at him, this man who had proven that love was real, who had fought for her and with her, who had given her everything she had stopped believing she could have. "It was fate. We were meant to find each other." "You believe in fairy tales now?" he teased gently. "No," she smiled. "I believe in something better. I believe in us. In the life we built together, the family we created, the love we fought for and earned. Fairy tales are nice stories, but what we have is real, and that makes it so much better than any fairy tale could ever be." As the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Yates pulled her close. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the land they had fought for and built a life on, surrounded by the legacy of their love. The mail-order bride who had thought love was impossible had found it in the arms of a cowboy who proved it was real. And together, they had created a fairy tale that was better than any story because it was theirs, earned through choice and commitment and fighting for each other, day after day, year after year. Their story was not one of instant passion or dramatic declarations. It was quieter than that, built in moments, in standing together against threats, in rebuilding after loss, in the decision to keep choosing each other, even when it would have been easier to walk away, in raising children and building a ranch and creating a life that was rich and full and exactly what they both needed. As they grew older, they never lost that sense of partnership that had defined them from the beginning. When Yates's back started giving him trouble, Eliza was there to help with the work he could no longer do easily. When Eliza caught pneumonia one terrible winter, Yates sat by her bedside for 3 days straight until the fever broke, refusing to leave her side. They were two halves of a whole, each making the other stronger, better, more complete. Their grandchildren grew up hearing stories of how Grandma Eliza had stood up to the bad men threatening the ranch, how she had found the solution that saved their land. They heard about Grandpa Yates building the ranch from nothing, about his integrity and hard work. But most of all, they heard about how their grandparents loved each other, how they chose each other every day, how they proved that real love was not about grand gestures but about showing up, standing together, and never giving up on each other. On a warm spring day in 1913, 30 years after that first meeting in Tascosa, Eliza and Yates stood together at their eldest grandson's wedding. The boy was marrying a sweet girl from town, and as they spoke their vows, Eliza felt Yates's hand tighten on hers. "Remember when that was us?" He whispered. "How could I forget? You looked terrified." I was about to marry the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, and I had no idea if she would ever come to care for me." He smiled at her, the lines around his eyes deepening. "Best day of my life, even with the terror." "Mine too," she agreed, even though I did not know it at the time. They watched the young couple kiss, saw the hope and nervousness in their faces, and Eliza sent up a silent prayer that they would find even a fraction of the happiness she and Yates had built together. That night, lying in bed in the house they had shared for 3 decades, Yates pulled Eliza close. "I love you," he said, as he did every night. "More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow." "I love you too," she replied, the words as true as they had ever been. "You made me believe in fairy tales again, Yates Patterson. But better than that, you made me believe in us. We make a good team, the best team." She kissed him softly. "Thank you for proving love was real. Thank you for fighting for us. Always, Eliza, always." They drifted off to sleep in each other's arms. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life of meaning and purpose and deep, abiding love. The mail-order bride and the cowboy who had proven that sometimes, if you were very lucky and willing to fight for it, love was not just a fairy tale. It was the most real thing in the world. As the years continued to pass, Eliza and Yates became fixtures in Tascosa, respected elders who people turned to for advice and wisdom. They had seen the town grow from a rough frontier settlement to a proper community with schools and churches and regular law enforcement. They had weathered droughts and harsh winters, economic downturns and personal losses, but through it all, they had each other. Their children grew and had families of their own, and the ranch that Yates had built alone became a family enterprise, with William taking over the day-to-day operations while James handled the legal affairs, and Rose kept the books when she was not teaching. Even Clara, who married a banker from Amarillo, stayed involved, visiting regularly with her husband and children. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1923, the family threw a huge celebration. The ranch house was full to bursting with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, with neighbors and friends who had become like family over the decades. A photographer came from Amarillo to take pictures, and Eliza insisted on taking one with just her and Yates, standing on the porch where they had shared so many sunsets. Looking at that photograph later, Eliza marveled at how they had changed. Yates's dark hair was completely silver now, and he walked with a cane most days. Her own face was lined with the years, her hands marked by a lifetime of work. But when she looked at that picture, she saw beyond the physical changes. She saw the way Yates's hand rested on her waist with easy familiarity. She saw the genuine smiles on both their faces, the comfort and love that radiated from them. They had become the fairy tale, even though neither of them believed in such things anymore. They preferred the reality they had built together. Winter came hard that year, and with it, Yates's health began to decline. He had never been one to complain, but Eliza could see the pain he tried to hide, the way his breath came shorter after even simple exertion. The doctor said his heart was wearing out, that decades of hard work were taking their toll. "I am not ready," Eliza told him one night, her voice breaking. "I am not ready to lose you." "You are not losing me," Yates said, pulling her close despite the effort it cost him. "I will always be with you, Eliza. In this house we made a home, in the children we raised, in every sunset you watch from that porch. I will always be here." "It is not the same." "No," he agreed, "but it is what we get, and we have been so blessed, love. We have had 40 years together. We have built something beautiful. That is more than most people ever get." He made it through the winter, stubbornly holding on, and when spring came, he rallied enough to walk the property one more time with William, pointing out things that needed attention, passing on the last of his knowledge about the land and the cattle and the horses he loved. On a beautiful May evening, with the sky painted in those golds and crimsons he had loved, Yates passed away peacefully in his sleep with Eliza holding his hand. The whole town mourned him, and the church was packed for his funeral. People spoke of his integrity, his hard work, his willingness to stand up for what was right. But Eliza barely heard them. She was remembering the man who had given her time to choose him, who had proved that love was real by showing it every day in 1,000 small ways. She was remembering the partner who had stood with her through everything, who had never failed her, who had loved her with a steadiness that never wavered. The grief was crushing. And for a while, Eliza did not know how to exist in a world without Yates in it. But she had their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of whom rallied around her. And she had the ranch, the legacy they had built together. Slowly, she found her way forward. She started writing down their story, wanting future generations to know how it had really been, how a scared girl from Philadelphia and a lonely rancher had found each other and built something extraordinary. She wrote about the barn burning and Creed's threats and the solution that had saved them. She wrote about their children being born and the life they had created. But mostly, she wrote about love, about how it was not a fairy tale but something real and tangible, built through choice and commitment and standing together. She lived another 7 years, long enough to see her youngest great-grandchild born, long enough to know that the ranch would continue, that the legacy she and Yates had built would endure. On a warm spring evening in 1930, Eliza sat on the porch watching the sunset, just as she had done so many times with Yates. She closed her eyes and could almost feel his hand in hers, could almost hear his voice saying he loved her, more today than yesterday, less than tomorrow. And she smiled because she knew he had been right. He had never really left her. He was in every board of this house, every fence post on the property, every sunset that painted the sky. He was in their children's faces and their grandchildren's laughter. He was woven into the very fabric of her life so completely that he could never truly be gone. That night, Eliza passed away peacefully in her sleep, in the bed she had shared with Yates for so many years. The family buried her beside him, under the wide Texas sky they had both loved. The headstone was simple, bearing both their names and the dates of their 2 short lives, but also an inscription that Eliza had requested. Love is not a fairy tale. It is real and worth fighting for. The ranch continued, passed down through generations, each one hearing the story of Eliza and Yates, the mail-order bride and the cowboy who had proven that love was real. Their story became legend in Tascosa, a reminder that sometimes the best love stories were not the ones that started with instant passion, but the ones that were built slowly, carefully, through choice and commitment, and showing up for each other, day after day, year after year. And on warm spring evenings, when the sky painted itself in golds and crimsons, people would swear they could sometimes see 2 figures on the old ranch house porch, sitting close together, hands intertwined, watching the sunset just as they had done for so many years. Whether it was real or just a trick of the light, no one could say for sure, but it did not really matter. Because the love Eliza and Yates had shared was real, more real than any fairy tale could ever be, and it lived on in the legacy they had built together, in the family they had created, in the lives they had touched. Their story was proof that love was not something that just happened to you. It was something you chose every single day. It was standing together when things got hard. It was fighting for each other and with each other. It was building a life brick by brick, moment by moment, choice by choice. And when you did that, when you committed to someone with your whole heart and never gave up, you created something more beautiful and enduring than any fairy tale could ever be. You created something real, something worth fighting for. Something that lasted not just a lifetime, but for generations to come, inspiring others to believe that true love was possible, that it was worth the risk, worth the fight, worth everything. And that was the greatest fairy tale of all, the one that was true. The story of Eliza and Yates Patterson, who met as strangers and became soulmates, who built an empire on love and left a legacy that would never be forgotten.